Yo, everybody, Sticks here at the Token Minorities, bringing you another deck on Pokemon TCGO. And before I really get into the deck, I just wanted to remind you guys that if you like this video or found it helpful, please leave a like and drop a comment and perhaps subscribe. It helps us out a lot and lets us do more for you. Now, I know you see what's in front of you, and please put the torches and pitchforks down. I hate myself for doing this, but considering regionals and such are approaching and have already passed by the time this video will go out, really, Seismitoad just always seems to have a presence in regionals since it was released in Furious Fist, so I felt that I really should get a deck video out just to show you one way to use it, because, I mean, again, it's always used in top level of competition, and I hate myself for doing this, but it is undeniably one of the most effective decks, and so we will just... You know what, you'll see, and again, I hate myself for doing this. I am more than likely going to get yelled at whenever I play matches with this deck, and I do not spam this deck, I would like to point that out, but I nonetheless needed to show this because it is undeniably one of the most effective decks. Now, like I said, this deck is around Seismitoad EX with the Quaking Punch attack, 30 damage, and locks your opponent from items. So, I mean, that's really, this deck is entirely around disruption. You want a Quaking Punch with Seismitoad so your opponent really can't get anything going. And in the most recent set, which was Breakpoint, Seismitoad got even better because Garbodor with the Garbotoxin ability was re-released. And yeah, now it's back in standard play, and Garbotoxin, if this Pokemon has a tool card attached to it, each Pokemon in play in each player's hand and in each player's discard pile has no abilities except for Garbotoxin. So even if you run up against a Trevenant deck, well, guess what? If you have Garbotoxin active, their item lock has no effect on you, and if you have Seismitoad continually Quaking Punching, then your item lock is effective on them. Another backup attacker we have is the Giratina EX with the Renegade Pulse. Prevent all effects of attacks, including damage done to this Pokemon by your opponent's Mega Evolution Pokemon. Now, this is shut off by Garbotoxin, so you have to be very selective about when you decide to use the Garbotoxin ability. And there might even be some matches, like if you're against a pure Mega deck, where you don't want to use Garbotoxin at all and just want to abuse Renegade Pulse. And Giratina also has a pretty solid attack in Chaos Wheel, 100 for 4, which isn't the best, but your opponent cannot play any Tool, Special Energy, or Stadium cards from their hand during their next turn. So, I mean, it's great for disruption, it's great for late game cleaning up once Seismitoad has crippled your opponent, and I mean, yeah, that's pretty much a Pokemon line apart from 2 Shaymin, but again, Shaymin are Shaymin, and just remember, if you have a tool on Garbodor, Shaymin will not work. There is no way that Shaymin can be played, and if you play Shaymin, then you kind of just look dumb because it's your own deck. And not that I've ever done that or anything. I have a couple times and I felt really stupid. Mostly because I'm not used to using a disruption deck, but I mean, that's just my style of play. I kind of like to enjoy my battles and not just kind of stall my opponent until they can't do anything. On to the items. Again, we are being scumbags because we are using 2 Crushing Hammer, flip a coin if heads, discard an energy attached to one of your opponent's Pokemon, and Enhanced Hammer, which just discards special energy. Again, super scumbaggy. We are also using 1 Eco Arm to get some of our tools back. If Garbodor gets like startling Megaphone, like if you don't have the item lock going, or if your items get discarded, Eco Arm can be used to bring them back in. I mean, you really don't need to particularly play Floatstone on Garbodor, but considering how heavy it is, Floatstone is the item of choice on that. So, I mean, Eco Arm can be used if your opponent manages to, like, Lysander in your Garbodors and get rid of the tools. And also, in a pinch, it can actually be used for Headringer, so you can reuse that if you take out your opponent's EX and you discard your Headringer. We are using 1 Escape Rope, again, for kind of disruption. It's basically a switch, and it also forces your opponent to bring in something that they might not necessarily want active, so that is why that is there. 1 Super Rod, just to get back, I mean, anything. We're only running a 2-2 line of Trubbish and Garbodor, so if you have to discard those or they get knocked out to where you can't get the ability lock going, you can Super Rod them back into your deck so that you are able to once again be a scumbag and get an ability and item lock going. 1 switch, I mean, you could run 2 switches, you could run 2 escape ropes. I just prefer 1 of each because they're so situational. It really does not particularly matter. I haven't run into a situation where I'm like, oh, I wish I had another escape rope or I wish I had another switch. I mean, just 2 with the same type of ability is nice, because all of our Pokemon are heavy except for Shaman, so if they get Lysandered active, then you are in a bit of trouble, and without one of these, you could potentially be in for a couple turns of just nothing. 4 Ultra Ball to get everything out. I mean, you could run a Level Ball for Trubbish, but I don't really think that's worth it. Ultra Ball is just better all around because it gets everything else out, and Level Ball would only be good for the Trubbish, and you only really want to play 1, 2 at the absolute max per game. Running 4 VS Seeker just to reuse our supporters. 1 Delinquent. I mean, again, we are being a scumbag. Discard any Stadium card in play. If you do, your opponent discards 3 cards from his or her hand. So, if your opponent has a beneficial Stadium in play and they have a low hand, just use Delinquent. Get rid of the Stadium and get rid of 3 cards. Very scumbaggy. Also using 1 Judge to disrupt our opponent and shuffle stuff back into our deck. Just another scumbag mechanic we are implying. Or not implying, applying to our deck. 2 Lysander. I mean, Lysander is actually a card that's not just for stalling, but it can be used for stalling, so I don't consider it scumbaggy that we have it in this deck. Normally, I don't like running Birch in my more competitive decks, just because, I mean, it's a 50-50 about whether or not you get 7 cards or 4 cards, but this deck doesn't always mind just being down to 4 cards, because usually you just have your opponent on lock, and you can usually afford a turn or 2 where you don't always draw what you need. So Birch is good if you have some stuff in your hand that you don't want to get rid of. 3 Sycamore, just for a fresh hand of 7 cards. And then we are back to the scumbag stuff with 1 Team Flare Grunt to discard an energy attached to your opponent's active Pokemon. Maybe get them like stuck active or something like that. And 1 Xerosic to get rid of a Pokemon tool or special energy in play. It's worth noting that Xerosic can actually be used on your own Garbodor if you have a Shaman in hand. Like if you have a Shaman and a Xerosic, but there's a tool in your Garbodor, you can play down the Xerosic to get rid of the tool on the Garbodor, so you have your Shaman's ability back, draw 6 more cards, and then play an item back onto Garbodor. So I mean, that's a kind of neat strategy that I've actually had to use a couple times. I mean, it hasn't always worked to perfection because I haven't always gotten another tool, but it is something that's just nice to have in case. 3 Rough Seas. We could run Silent Lab as another disruption tool, but again, Garbodor shuts down all abilities, so you really don't need Silent Lab at all. I mean, it can be helpful early game if you don't have a Garbodor set up, but I found that the damage you can heal off from Rough Seas is usually more worth it than the early shutting off of abilities, so that's why that's there, just to heal off Seismitoad, because that's the main attacker of this deck. 3 Fighting Fury Belt to give Seismitoad a little more attack, but also increase its longevity significantly. 2 Float Stones, just, I mean, to get stuff going, like to get Free Retreat on the Garbodor and the and really anything. I mean, mostly it's going to be attached to Garbodor, but that's it. 2 Headringers just to slow our opponents down. 2 of the Double Dragon Energy for Giratina, that's the only thing you want to run it for. 4 of the Double Colorless Energy for Seismitoad. Yeah, Seismitoad and Giratina, and then 5 regular Water Energy for Seismitoad. I made this deck when I was a little bit paranoid about Special Energy and them being discarded, so I might reduce that count to give myself a few more draw supporters. In fact, you know what? I think I'm going to go ahead and do that. Let's get rid of 1 of the Water Energy. I want to have 2 just because, I mean, like, that's a... I want to have 4 just because it's a magic number. You can get 2 Quaking Punches off with purely water, and then I will add 1 more Sycamore for the draw support, or apparently I don't have the reverse Sycamore, so I will just fix that. But anyway, this deck will have 4 Sycamores in it and only 4 Water Energy. But I'm done rambling. I think that is the longest deck intro I have done. I feel horrible doing this, but let's go ahead and see this deck in action. Alrighty, scumbag mode engage, as we are against a dark and normal deck with Husky, piloted by Husky. Was that a 16? I couldn't tell. But anyway, I'm fully expecting my opponent to be like, why are you running this deck? And all I can do is just say, I am sorry, I have to do this. Well, I don't really have to do this. I mean, I want to do it, but I want to get a video out for a good deck, but I have to do a deck that isn't the most fun to play against or play with. So we do win the coin flip, meaning that we will go first. Yes, we do want to, and I would like to point out that you definitely can run Hoopa in this deck. That is a definite possibility. However, I really don't think that it's always that worth it, just because, I mean, it takes up a bench spot, and normally, okay, so my opponent is running Headringer as well, meaning we will want to get our items out, and it looks like we don't start with the best hand, really. So, okay, we do, my opponent does mulligan twice, so what I'm hoping for is we can get like a Seismitoad and a switch or something like that, or a Floatstone and a Seismitoad, or yeah, I mean, that, I guess that technically works too. So let's go ahead and start. My opponent starts with a Shaman. That is great for us. Let's go ahead and play the Floatstone down. I kind of want to just go ahead and get the Rough Seas in play. I know my opponent will probably counter it, but considering I have to go for the Professor Birch's Observations right now, I have too many good things in hand. We even get some pretty solid stuff. I can go ahead and play a Seismitoad down, play a Trubbish, go for an Ultra Ball, get rid of the Judge and the Professor Birch's Observations to grab a Shaman, hopefully get a, I don't know. Oh, that's right, I'm hoping to get a DCE and a Fighting Fury Belt or something like that. We don't get either, so what I am just going to immediately do is retreat into my Seismitoad, and I think I'm going to end my turn right there. I could potentially Ultra Ball for the other Shaman and fish out a little more. So you know what, that's actually what I'm going to go ahead and do. Get rid of the Lysander and the Team Flare Grunt, go for the Shaman, draw 3 more cards, and then see if we can like get something else going. I will be able to Sycamore next turn, so that's why I'm playing down my hand. I mean, Hoopa could be okay here, but I find that you generally don't need it that much. So what I am going to do is go ahead and play the DCE onto the Seismitoad, and then end my turn right there. My opponent will more than likely be under the item lock very soon. I don't want to get the other Giratina in play, just because that thing is kind of just, I mean, it's like it's almost dead weight, and also I want to save that spot for another Seismitoad. I mean, my opponent is able to get an Yveltal out. If he does and attaches like a DCE to it, I can just immediately Enhanced Hammer that thing away. Does get the Fighting Fury Belt on him, so that's unfortunate. We do even see that my opponent is running the Zoroark Break. So, alright, we do see the Floatstone on the Shaman. I'm hoping that my opponent tries to play a DCE onto the... Okay, that is perfect for us. He will be able to retreat into the Yveltal, but I will immediately be able to get rid of that DCE this turn. Ultra Ball for a Garbodor, and then Sycamore away the rest of my hand. So I'm in a very good position right now. I don't like that I'm in such a good position because I kind of feel bad about it. But then again, I mean, that's what you want to do with this deck. You want to disrupt your opponent. You want to make them... you want to just disrupt them, really. I mean, that's kind of what I just said, but you want to make it impossible for them to do much against you. We do see the Ultra Ball probably for another Shaman. My opponent knows that he's going to be shut down next turn, so he might as well play out all of his items and his entire hand. And another beneficial thing about this deck is that you're forcing your opponent to really put everything on a first turn to where they're not always able to respond to anything that you are able to do to them. So that's what I'm hoping to do right here. He does just retreat into his Yveltal and passes the turn. That is great. What I can immediately do is Enhanced Hammer away that DCE. Go ahead and Ultra Ball away the Giratina and the water, and my opponent just scoops. So I mean, like, yeah, that was... This deck, I mean, you can't really play out full games online with it just because your opponent can see your setup and say, okay, I really don't want to play this, or your opponent can just see that you have a Seismitoad and say, I don't want to play this. I apologize to the people that I play against with this deck, but I mean, I do want to showcase how this deck works. I mean, that was pretty much how it does. Get a Seismitoad, slap a DCE on it, put a Garbodor on the bench, put a Tool on it, and that just shuts down abilities and shuts down items, so it really just leaves your opponent with not much. And if they use Special Energy, get rid of that with Enhanced Hammer. If they use a regular energy, you can get rid of that with Crushing Hammer or Team Flare Grunt. So I mean, that's really what the deck is. I'm going to try to get another one, but this most likely will be it'll either be a shorter video or a much longer video if I have an opponent who decides to play it all out. So I'm just going to go ahead and try to find another match. Alrighty, we have another game that is bound to be full of scumbaggery. Yes, I made up a word, I'm sorry. And I will probably not make up that word again because it kind of just sounds weird, and yeah. Anyway, we are against a Dark and Psychic and normal deck, so I mean, it looks to be, what does it look to be? It looks to be Darkrai. That's what it looks to be, a Darkrai and Hypno deck. We do lose the coin flip, so we will get to go second. That's not always the worst thing. The only bad thing is we won't be able to evolve first. But I do get a solid-ish hand. You know what, I get a decent hand to start off with, just because, I mean, this deck is revolving around stalling. I do want to get a Trubbish to shut down the Hypno as soon as possible, but we will see. My opponent hopefully does not have a Headringer or something to delay the turn 2, whatever I was going to go for, Quaking Punch. But hopefully, okay, so we do see the Darkness Energy on the Zubat. We see the Shaman. Oh man, my opponent must not have anything if he's using a Shaman for one card and he's attaching the energy to the Zubat. So we will see. I mean, this is one instance where I could see using Muscle Band over the Fighting Fury Belt, just because it would immediately get a knockout on the Zubat. But you know what, I'm okay in this instance, so I'm going to go ahead and attach a DCE, attach Fighting Fury Belt, go for the Crushing Hammer. We even get heads. So not only will my opponent not be able to use items, he will also have to either evolve the Zubat or attach another energy in order to retreat. I mean, he could have the Golbat in hand, but okay, so he does. He will be able to go for the... Okay, so the Golbat has the Sneaky Bite. I forget what Crobat has, but that will be able to do 30 damage. I do have the Rough Seas in hand, where I will just be able to completely mitigate the damage from that. I'm going to go ahead and do that. Rough Seas, get rid of the damage on Seismitoad. Attach a Water Energy because, I mean, worst case scenario, we go for a Grenade Hammer at some point to get a knockout and some more cards. I really don't feel the need to right now, just because we are in such a good position. Okay, my opponent is running a T-Tar Bats deck. Looks like it's a Mega T-Tar Bats deck, which will be almost completely shut down by my item lock. So I am just going to go for this again, go for the... I think I'm just going to go for the Quaking Punch because I will be able to take a KO on the Shaman next turn, and I'm really not in a position where I need to Grenade Hammer, and I think the best thing in this situation is to just keep up the Quaking Punch lock. My opponent does decide to just end it by evolving into the Mega T-Tar. I kind of want to judge my opponent, but I don't want to give him a new hand. Actually, you know what? I think that is my best option at this point. Just get 4 more cards, see if we can get something we can work with. Okay, I do get something. What I can do is Ultra Ball away the Garbodor and the... Do I want to get rid of the Garbodor? I think, no, I want to keep that just in case, so I'll get rid of the... No, I will get rid of the Garbodor and the Water Energy to grab a Shaman. Do I have... The other Garbodor is in my deck, that's good to know. What about the Trubbish? Okay, so I don't have anything of particular value prized. I will just go for a Shaman, get 5 more cards, not 6 cards. Well, I have a hand of 6 cards, but I will only get 5 cards. And my opponent just scoops because we got a new hand and he really couldn't do anything. So, I mean, that's the problem with this deck is, I mean, it wins and it's very, very, very effective. But when you're playing online, I feel really, really badly about using this deck because if you're playing online, I'm one of these people too. I'm playing for fun. I don't necessarily want to face an uber competitive deck, and especially one that is based around not letting your opponent play. I mean, that's really what the goal of this entire deck is, to just not let your opponent do anything. So, I mean, I'm sorry that this video is short, but I mean, I tried to get a couple games, but they just... I mean, we were able to set up immediately, and our opponent just didn't have anything to do and they didn't want to stick around just to see repeated 40 damages take out their entire lineup of Pokemon. I mean, my opponent this match was even forced to Mega Evolve manually and couldn't even get really any energy down. So again, I apologize to my opponents for using this deck. I normally like to use more fun decks, but with the with regionals just happening and the worlds being in the future and nationals and worlds in the future, I felt like I wanted to get this deck out just to show you that this is a very viable strategy. It's a scumbaggy one, but is very viable and very successful. So I hope you let's be real, nobody would enjoy watching this type of video, but I hope you found it informative and you saw that the success that this type of deck was able to have. So thank you for watching, guys. Like, comment, subscribe, all of that stuff. And this is Styx signing out. Why not? See you guys.